the most important part is the idea, the message, the communication of what's valuable. We can fix the spelling. We can fix the punctuation. We can fix the sentence structure. We can fix the continuity. That's all things that you can send to the repair department. But we can't send your ideas.
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I am super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing guest, Donna. Donna, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you, Michelle.
Excellent. So tell everybody who you are and what you love to do.
Well, you've already given everybody my name, Donna, so that's probably the most important part. It's important to remember the other part too, which is Donna Dahl. What do? I love to marry two different pieces of my world. One is that part of my world where I am an empowerment coach. I love to work with you in order to help you build your confidence, build your brand, build your identity, build the direction that you're going to head toward. And if I could marry that with the possibility that what you might do is write a book that would build your platform, that would expand your voice and augment the authority with which you present yourself to the world, then I'm in my happy place.
Nice. I love it. So how did you get into the coaching and the book side of things?
Oh boy.
We might have two stories and pick whichever one you want first.
Long story short, where I've ended up today has been largely by invitation. It all began when Ilika Ray invited me to write an article for the magazine that she was publishing at the time, Rising Women. And I put together that first article that took me 3 weeks to produce 1,000 words. And then somebody came along and said, there's a book in there. Exactly the same kind of thing I now like to do to poke other people, to say, there's a book in there. And they go, no. Well, guess what I said? No. But I kept being prodded. And I am most appreciative that I was, because 14 months later, I had my first book.
Yay!
And that book launched my coaching business. Nice. And I've subsequently written a total of 6 books and thousands of words that have been published in print and or online.
Nice. So clearly you've become a prolific writer. Let's kind of backtrack in that moment before when you were getting poked and prodded. Was there anything inside of you that said, yeah, I'm an author? Or were you like, didn't even hit the radar, like was like totally out of scope? Or where were you at kind of mindset wise about writing books before the article?
Well, a couple of things come to mind, Michelle. One is that I think we all experience places and times where we have a fleeting moment. It just kind of, goes in one ear and out the other, or one eye and out the. So there I am in high school, and we're doing this thing of, pick what you want to be when you grow up. I don't know. I'm still growing. And one of of course, the A's are the first in the list because it goes in alphabetical order. And I come across this word that says author. Well, I think it lasted long enough to leave an imprint, but not enough to make an impression. So I never really was much of a reader per se, because there weren't a lot of books around. So reading ended up becoming something that was important to me at university. I needed to read. I mean, you can't pass a course without reading thousands of words. So I'm
really, really heavy books back then.
really heavy books. And then subsequently in my professional life, I ended up as editor of a couple of professional publications. And and it still didn't really grab me that I would write a book. Because I mean, books are written by famous people, right? Books are written by people who have enormous stores of knowledge to dispense to the world, and I didn't really put myself in that category. But what I've learned through the writing process is that uh, we grow as we write. We expand who we are and what we have to say as we write, and it's a very humbling experience. And I particularly enjoy the opportunity to work with writers as they begin to develop their voices and the message that they want to share with the world. Because it doesn't take mountains of knowledge. It takes a commitment to do the project.
Nice. I love that. Well, and I'm sure every famous author in history would agree that they didn't start off famous. It takes a couple of books to get there. Even Socrates didn't start out famous. It was writing a book and moving his way on. Nice. Well, and I know that there's a huge learning curve in it, much like speaking, right? The first time you get up and speak, your knees are knocking, you're sweating, you forget what you're going to say, maybe, or you were really well practiced. I'm just giving you my scenario. When I got up there, it was like, I'm doing what? Okay. And it's funny with my first book, I wrote that years ago now. And one of the reviews I got was she doesn't know how to entice the reader to move on. And I said, well, that's not a very flattering review. I don't think I want that review. And she goes, okay. But then I picked up my book the other day because my dad had grabbed it and was reading it. And so I picked it up, started reading it, and went, wow, that is not enticing. Okay, she had a point. Maybe I could rewrite this and have a little more enticing at the beginning. I just go like, boom, information drop. Here you go. This is what we're doing. You may or may not be interested.
A rewrite is always possible.
Exactly. It's the fun part about books. And I think too, on that note, that a lot of writers, potential writers, get stuck on it has to be perfect. Have you ever experienced that?
If we have stumbling blocks in the world, it's probably labeled perfectionism. The perfect, we want things when they're going to be located in our national library to be as perfect as possible. Spelling, grammar, sentence structure, all of that really matters. But it doesn't matter to me when I'm working with writers, because the most important part is the idea, the message, the communication of what's valuable. We can fix the spelling, we can fix the punctuation, we can fix the sentence structure, we can fix the continuity. That's all things that you can send to the repair department. But we can't send your ideas, because that's the value that you bring, and that's the part that we're going to work on bringing out.
So who would you say you serve and support? I'm assuming it's mostly business people that want to write the book as a platform for their business, or is it somebody else, or is it specific within that?
I can't really part people into a category, because I work with writers who are writing business material. I work with writers who are writing fiction, be it fantasy or science fiction. I work with people who are doing memoir. It really doesn't matter, because, as I said, it's your message, it's the value that you're bringing. And I mean, some of our favorite lessons probably came from watching cartoons or watching movies, the animated movies. Yeah, we don't necessarily have to have something that uh, feels like, the 10 best ways to create happiness in your life. And you get to lesson number 10 and you feel guilty because you haven't implemented any of them.
Right? That never happened to any author, I'm sure.
No.
It's hilarious. Awesome. So that's quite the diversity. So when people are working with you, is there kind of a certain process that you take them through, or is it kind of whatever they need at that time? How do you work with people?
Well, when there are not that many people that already have developed their entire book, unless they've perhaps already written the entire manuscript, and then we start from that point. But if we're starting from word one, like the first word to put on the page, I have a system that I take my writers through over the course of a 4-week period, so that by the time those 4 sessions are up, there is a solid foundation from which to proceed. And while, there, in comparing my program to other programs where people can enter a class and be together with 10 or 20 or 30 other people who are also participating in the writing project, the difference with me is that your intellectual property is protected because we're working one-on-one. We're working according to your needs, your timeline, the space you have available for this, your skills, your talents, your ideas, and they never go anywhere except in the confidential setting that we create.
Nice. I love that. So do you have a separate process for nonfiction, fiction, or otherwise, or did books tend to have a similar spine, if you want to put it that way?
Well, I'm going to return the question with a question.
Excellent.
When you read a book,
Mhm.
do you expect to be taken on a journey that manifests something that you were in search of?
Ooh. My immediate answer was yes, absolutely, when I read
Yeah.
a novel.
Yes.
And then I think about textbooks and go, no. Maybe that's just my PTSD with textbooks.
Well, it could be, but a textbook that's written for the purpose of teaching may not necessarily be the same as a textbook that builds with a crescendo the same way that a story builds with a crescendo.
Be way more
Because
interesting of a textbook, wouldn't
if I can help you make that textbook evolve in the shape of a crescendo in order to keep the reader engaged, is that worth having?
it? Hey, maybe that's what she was talking about when she reviewed my book instead of missing it. So the answer is yes, absolutely, we need it. So awesome. And I did have another question for you, is because I'm thinking about writing my second book, just because, and some people are saying just stick to chapter books because they're faster, they're easier to get out. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you please
Expand.
explain what you
Chapter
mean
book
by
is? So basically, instead of writing a book, so the business right now, the working title is Business Ownership, Secrets to Scaling. And I talk about system strategy, support, and state of mind, which I always do. And they're like, just cut it down. That sounds like War and Peace. Just give me a title, a chapter book on strategy. And it may even be a chapter book on something about strategies, as opposed to kind of giving you the entirety of War and Peace as a book.
If I was working with you, Michelle, the first place that we would start would be with your ideal marketing plan for the information that you want to share before deciding the form that it will take when it's manifested. So each of those parts is essential. What the baby looks like when it's born.
And whether or not I have
It,
quadruplets.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Interesting.
Very.
So
Awesome. Yep.
it's important. It's important to understand the purpose for which you're writing, the people that you want to reach.
Makes good sense. So when you're kind of reading those or looking at those, are you like, I would think that if I was editing those, I wouldn't even be able to kind of go, hey, this is a great book, unless if it intrigued me, I'd be going, wow, you actually intrigued me. That was awesome. How do you feel when you're editing the books, I guess is what I'm asking.
Humbled.
Nice.
Filled with joy. People who commit to writing have a high regard for being able to be alone and to prospect that space. And it can be the most beautiful, imaginative, remarkable space on the planet. And so to be invited into someone else's personal, private space, it needs to be treated with respect, as well as the joy of what's happened, regardless of how perfect it was. You finished the manuscript, like that. That's
Yay!
Yay! That's a celebration.
Awesome. So what would you say is your favorite part of your business?
Just people. People. People are looking for someone that can be their cheerleader, someone that can hold their hand, someone that can motivate them, inspire them, give them honest, critical, valuable, effective feedback. That's probably the most important piece of any relationship between a coach and a client, or between a manuscript coach and a writer, or even as an editor, to say, this paragraph needs to stop here, and it needs to be the beginning of the next paragraph in order to help your thoughts move along. Because it can be something as simple as, where do you divide the paragraph? It took me 2 years to write Lessons I Learned from the Tortoise. So some people say, well, how long does it take to write a book? Well, you can read all kinds of stuff on the internet that says, write a book in 90 days. Ta-da! Here we go. And, you might be able to write a book in 90 hours. It's not the time that you necessarily measure the experience by. It's when it's finished. And some things take longer than others. So some techniques to writing take longer than others. Tortoise wasn't built in a day. It honestly took 2 years from start to finish to make that book, whereas the first book landed in 14 months. So, we know it takes 9 months to birth a child, give or take. How long does it take to birth your book? I don't know.
Very cool. So when somebody's working with you, how do you, because I think I say, how do you help them draw the material out of them? Because sometimes people just kind of channel a book. It's like, bam, they put the pen and paper and bam, within 2 days it's written and they're exhausted and they drop. But the book's written. And then others are like, well, I kind of sort of think that about, maybe. Um, I guess, does that ever happen to your clients? And two, if it does, how do you help them through that?
How do I help them through that? Well, I'm great at hand holding. So sometimes it's about questions. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Sometimes it's just simply about listening. I happen to think that there's a high percentage of people in the population who do their best thinking out loud. So if you have somebody to think out loud with, it smooths the path. If you have to do all the thinking yourself, you know what happens? That little naysayer voice shows up and goes, "Oh, really? Are you sure? I don't think so." And so you begin to believe the negative thoughts that come forward. So working with somebody who can listen to what you think the problem is may not even in fact be the problem. But thinking out loud lets the conversation evolve to a place where you can begin to take over and go back to work.
So give us an example of one of your Cinderella stories of one of your clients that was maybe scrambling to get their book done and worked with you and got it done, or some variation thereof.
Um, Several come to mind.
Yay, we got several stories. Start at one and we'll go through them. I'm totally cool with that.
Are you really?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll pick out all the fun parts about it.
One of my clients, a business client, wanted to become a science fiction writer. And so, I mean, that's kind of like changing horses midstream, but needed some support in terms of taking the initial image, the initial idea, and molding it into something that would have a story to it. And that work, that initial impetus, has now turned into a series of 2 books. Yes. So
wow, that's amazing. And it always amazes me when I'm watching movies, reading books, otherwise, that I can see the plot and it's maybe, 6 sentences. And then they create this huge, Star Wars out of that. I'm like, wow, how did they do that? So that whole concept to me is fascinating and amazing, and that you help people to be able to do that is paramount too, because I think there's a whole lot, especially in fiction, about the whole character creation.
well, it's not just the plot, it's the setting, and then what is the modus operandi that you are going to use in order to propel the story? So will that be in the form of dialogue, or will that be in the form of narrative? So balancing those two enable the reader to be able to hear the movie or see the movie in their heads as they're reading. When you read fiction, you have a process that takes you through, whether you're watching the movie or whether you're actually hearing the characters engage in conversation. Like, can you actually hear the character spit on the floor out of like, and how does the writer make that happen? It's fun stuff.
That's awesome. Very cool. And you said you had a couple of those examples. So being
Well,
able to draw out that plot, and what else kind of
well,
happens when they're working?
well, sometimes it's voice. With one writer, she was having some difficulty in terms of completing the book because it was a semi-memoir that uh, focused on the specific manner of speaking that her primary subject had, and she wanted that way of speaking captured throughout the book. Uh, that was her way of honoring someone that had been present in her life. The majority of books that are written with that kind of dialect are written so that the first chapter will have the dialect, but subsequent chapters won't because it's tedious for the reader. But as this was a book of short stories, it didn't necessarily follow that only the first chapter should have the dialect. And so I needed to learn the dialect in order to support her book.
Awesome. How'd you do that?
With my ears.
Well, yeah.
With
So
my
listening
with
to
my
her, to go to YouTube,
uh,
what'd you do?
I had to adopt the voice in my head. So once I had the voice, it's like learning to speak with a Boston accent, perhaps, or a Newfie accent. You learn to speak it, and then it flows.
Fun.
Too fun.
That's awesome. Cool. So other than kind of perfectionism or getting those roadblocks of kind of, I don't know how to bring that voice out, what are some of the other stumbling blocks that you've noticed that people have when they come to you?
Uh, well, they don't. I don't necessarily experience this because I can't recall a single time when I've experienced this with the writers that I've worked with. But before they come to me,
Yeah.
the number one, I don't have the time. Number two, I have no idea what I would write about. Okay, well, does writing even interest you? Does it motivate you? Is writing an interest for you? We, if we do not, as a population, begin to write our stories with greater vigor than what we have, we will not leave the legacy of our experience to future generations. So I think of an archaeological dig coming to Canada in 100 or 200 years from now, and what are they going to find as books written by Canadians? I think that we are shortchanging future generations unless we write, whether we're writing a book that is recording grandma's recipes, or whether we're writing a book of the stories that we told our children when they were growing up, or whether we're finishing off that manuscript that's stored, with 150 pages underneath your mattress, but it's still not a book. If you have an idea that's come to mind, a dream that you had that could make a most wonderful, wonderful story, why is it still sitting between your ears? Can we get it out on paper? Can we manifest it so that it is available to the reading public? I I I yearn for books that share our legacy, that share our history, that share our experience. And we shouldn't be shy about writing it. When I wrote Lessons I Learned from the Tortoise, I specifically chose stories about Canadians who have done remarkable things in order to help um, illustrate the lesson. And while I haven't gone back and reread the book in the recent past, I can tell you that we have lessons that we have learned from people like the famous five, who became the instrument of women being declared as persons throughout the British Commonwealth. We have the example of people like Lloyd Robertson, who sat in an anchor chair delivering the news to us in the media for decades. Oh my gosh. Like there's so much that has been contributed to the Canadian landscape, and we can be part of it. We have but to step up and say, pick me.
And I would venture to say, well, and I don't want to say I would argue, but I would argue. I think everybody around the world has that. And I think it's especially important right now that they get their words in writing, because otherwise the prolificness of social media and calling that kind of what's going on right now in our history, I think would be a shame, because I don't think it is. I think it's all being written by people who want a lot of pomp and air. And I think there's a lot of marketing going on, like, hey, you should read this because, you'll buy my stuff from me if you read it. There's a lot of misinformation. And I don't mean like bad news and propaganda, although there's a lot of that too. But I think there's a lot of things that are being written with an ulterior motive, that if we don't get our stories out, if we don't get grandma's recipes out, if we don't get our culture out, people will think that, social media is the way we lived right now. And I think that would be an absolute shame. I remember reading a book once, and I want to say it was like during the time of Plato, but it wasn't Plato. And it was just a story of this guy going through his day. And it was like, yeah, and this is what I ate for breakfast. And I talked to Joe, and we, went for a walk. Just figuring out what life was during that time, during the ancient Greek time. And it was fascinating to me, just because I could get into the mindset of an everyday person just doing their thing. And that story has lasted, what, ancient Greece was, Plato was, I want to say 1100 BC, something like that. Like, that was a long time ago.
I'd love to add to what you just said, because if we think about Samuel Clemens taking the pseudonym of Mark Twain and writing about two lads, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, having a heyday on the Mississippi River. If he wouldn't have taken the time to create that for us, I'm not sure that there would have been anything else that would be so mindful, so captivating to share what that era was like.
Mm-hmm.
For young men, learning to become who they were as a result of the antics that they pulled. I mean, I still think that we haven't made enough use of the work of Mark Twain, because I think that we could be turning the centuries old, barn raising thing into Tom Sawyer parties, where we have everybody come and help paint the fence or whatever else it was that needed to be done.
Right. Now, and I was going to bring up the whole dialect thing that you mentioned earlier, because Tom Sawyer in particular was famous for having a dialect that wasn't, quote unquote, socially appropriate at that time. So it created a huge uproar when he did it, and it's still creating a huge uproar, which I find fantastic. And it's like, all he did was write what was, which I think we need more of, and an understanding, so that we can understand the generations that came before us and how we want to shape generations coming forward.
Yes, because I mean, literature literature doesn't necessarily come from those that are the highest educated or those that have the greatest influence. We want our literature to come from the voice of the masses.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I could give a ton of examples that I'm going to screw up the titles and the authors, so I'm not going to do that, but look them up. And if you have them, Donna, feel free to give them now. Because I totally agree. I think that the individual perspective and viewpoint of reality right now is whether it's through, memoirs, and this is exactly what happened, or through creative writing, or through the fantasies, or through business. Like, that's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Charles Dickens gave us tremendous insight into the life and times in Great Britain at the time of his writing. And thanks, Charles. That we're delighted that you did that.
Absolutely. I love it. Awesome. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start their journey with you?
Well, they can begin by booking a discovery call. I'm at calendly.com/Donna Dahl, DonnaDahl. So just to make sure you get the doll part right. I'm also on LinkedIn. So you can find me there as Donna Dahl, DonnaDahl. And look up my website, Donna P. Dahl. Add the P in the middle, donnapdahl.com. And you'll come across some of the work that I've done with authors in the recent past. There's so much joy in being able to capture the language, the words that we want to use to communicate. And I look forward to having a conversation with your listeners about the magic of communication through words.
I love it. So, peeps, of course, we have all of Donna's links in the show notes. Just scroll down, or of course, go to awarenessstrategies.com/blog, search for Donna or Dahl. We'll have both spellings just for fun, just so you can find her. Doll, because she is a doll, and especially when you get to meet her, you'll love her. So I have to ask you, Donna, at what point in life did you know that you're a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Well, I suppose taking my book, my first book, days after it was out of the box, and you're looking at the baby that you've just given birth to, and here I go off to a networking event for women. There were I did the numbers because I really wanted to pay attention to the numbers. 32 women attended this event, and I had a table with an opportunity for people to enter a draw in order to for me to offer a prize. And the prize probably was spend some time with Donna. At that point, who the heck was Donna Dahl? Anyway, 8 people signed up for the draw, like 25%. I like that number. And of those 8 people, 6 of them ended up spending time with me. And I said, well, that's a 75% close rate. I can handle that. I think I have a business.
Nice. Well, congratulations, and an awesome business it is. Love it immensely. So, Donna, any last words for our peeps before we let go?
Oh, this is one of my favorite questions, Michelle, because in Tortoise, I wrote a chapter called The Afterword. And the afterword in the afterward, it was my intention to support all those people who are shy, who have been bullied, who listen long and strong to the naysayer voice in their ear, and who might stay silent or wait for perfection to arrive. And so I wrote the following words: challengers inspire us to take giant steps long before we might ever become giants. I am on a mission to be your challenger.
I love it. You are awesome, Donna. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know how valuable it is.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's been a delight.
Peeps, this is Michelle Nedlek. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and join our Facebook group, Business Ownership Secrets to Scaling. We love helping you grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.